Good evening. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater, home of the public programs for the UCLA Film and Television Archive. My name is Paul Malcolm. I'm the senior public programmer for the archive. Before we begin, as a land-grant institution, the UCLA Film and Television Archive would like to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. We are humbled to do work in this community. We want to thank all the individuals and organizations that have helped to make tonight's screening possible. All of the archive's screening in the Wilder are free thanks to a gift from an anonymous donor, and we are grateful to them for their support. And a big thank you to our community partners for tonight's screening at the UCLA African Studies Center, the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television, and the Via Albertine. Thank you all for coming out to our survey of films by Cameroonian writer-director Jean-Pierre Bekolo. An intoxicating swirl of magic and technology, folklore and genre, sensuality and politics energizes all of Jean-Pierre's work, including his debut feature, Quartier Mozart, the provocative comedy Aristotle's Plot, the first African science fiction film, The Bloodettes, and the spellbinding Afrofuturist Naked Reality. We are thrilled to be presenting each of these rarely screened works over the next 2 nights, and we are especially honored to do it with Jean-Pierre Bekolo here in person. Jean-Pierre's right there. Let's have a round of applause for Jean-Pierre. So tonight's program will begin with The Bloodettes, to be followed immediately by a Q&A with Jean-Pierre, moderated by UCLA Associate Professor Shelleen Greene. Then, after a 10-minute intermission, we will present Naked Reality. We are screening The Bloodettes on a 35mm print from Arsenal Berlin in Germany. We want to thank them for their allowing us to screen that, making that print available to us. The print, however, is unsubtitled, so we are going to be projecting English subtitles live during the screening. I'm going to be running those live subtitles back in the booth, so I'm going to apologize in advance for any mistakes that I make along the way. I practiced a lot this week. I'm going to do the best I can, so I beg your forgiveness. Thank you. Okay. The print looks gorgeous, by the way. I mean, the color is just amazing, so you're in for a treat. So, a visionary filmmaker and pioneering theorist who is deeply engaged with the social, political, and cultural issues facing Africa, and indeed all of us living in a global context, Jean-Pierre has won awards at major festivals and taught and lectured at major universities around the world. Most recently, he was named the 2024 Macmillan Stewart Fellow at Harvard. Please help me welcome to the stage Jean-Pierre Bekolo.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here, and thank Paul, UCLA, to really make this possible. UCLA is very important, let's say, step in my tour, because I've been since March doing university colleges around the country, presenting my films, all kind of them, because the spectrum is a little bit wide. I think we all lived the COVID-19 that kind of made us think that we're all going to die. So for me, it's like new birth, rebirth. And some of the films also were kind of not forgotten, but they were like past. And I think this has given me the opportunity to kind of, with the help of scholars and people like Paul, who actually see, let's say, a content that is kind of actual, you know, and that is could be discussed, you know, with all the actual themes. And I'm very grateful that tonight we are going to talk about Afrofuturism, because I think that's how the programming kind of organized it. I'll say something just now, is that every time we talk about Africa, it's always about the past or about the present. Future is kind of forbidden space. And I think cinema, on the top of it, is medium of the future somehow, you know. Speculating, you know, with cinema, asking the what if question. So obviously, as a filmmaker, it's not easy to kind of find the language to be able to express that future, or at least to question it. So I'll leave it to the film to kind of open the whole discussion, and I'll be there later with Shelleen to discuss more. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, I just wanted to thank you once again, Jean-Pierre, for joining us this evening for a conversation over 2 evenings of screenings of your film. And this evening, of course, we're going to screen 2. We just saw the amazing Bloodettes. And thank you so much. I wanted, of course, to begin maybe thinking about the title of this series, which is African Futurism. And of course, the Bloodettes is named the first African science fiction film. And so I want to talk a little bit about science fiction in the African context. And of course, the second film that we'll be screening tonight is Naked Reality, which is your 2016 also science fiction film. So I wanted to perhaps in this Q&A reflect upon these 2 films within the context of African futurism. And of course, you know, as we've seen tonight, these are 2 science fiction films, and specifically Afrofuturism is an expansive term, I think, very much. It encompasses African diasporic cultural production engaged with themes of science, technology, futurity, and perhaps liberation. But I was wondering if you would share with us, for you, what is Afrofuturism or African futurism? And if you can perhaps think of the distinction that's sometimes made between these 2 terms. And further, why have you perhaps returned to science fiction? And could you share with us some of your thoughts on these 2 films using cinema's capacity to show us possible futures, to speak to an African or perhaps specifically Cameroonian context? You have spoken about the capacity of Afrofuturist narratives to inject motion, which disrupts the static post-colonial narratives and perhaps restarts the march of history after a prolonged hiatus. I love that line. But I was wondering if you could start thinking about African futurism in terms of the work that you've done within this specific genre and how it resonates with our larger understanding of Afrofuturism.
Thank you. It's a very long question. Huh?
I was hoping you'd stop me.
But what I want to say is that if I just want to start with this specific film you just saw, I was actually surprised when I heard that it was the first African science fiction film. Many years after we did the film, that's where, I don't know who actually, somebody said this is the first African science fiction film. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it, it's actually many genres, or many impossible genres, meaning it was supposed to be a horror film, it was supposed to be a detective film because we are police, it was supposed to be a science fiction film, but I like this thing I always call making movies from a place, where the local perspective made it kind of impossible to make the horror, because it said death has become a party, funerals are the best parties. You know, like you could see. And then at the beginning, it says, how do you make a science fiction film in a country that has no future? Yes. But the whole idea was to play with the impossible genre, meaning that almost cinema, at least as we're mimicking, because there's a lot of mimicking in cinema, it's kind of impossible, you know, when you take it from the African perspective. Even if the whole film at the end becomes the genre it's supposed to not be, actually. Now, if we talk about the idea of science fiction, it's, for me, I want to keep it simple. It's about speculation, asking the what-if question. Mm-hmm. And what if is allow you to think. Actually, it's putting, it's making you think about the possible, the possibilities, and I think with cinema we can have what is, and also think what is possible. So I would say, in this specific case, if I take Les Seigneurs, it was what I would call a cautionary tale. It was really to say, if that element of the Cameroon society I see are continuing, this is what we're going to have. So it produced also, for some people, kind of dystopian world. But for me, the two girls in life actually are like in trance. It's like they don't want to kind of die with the whole context, the whole society that is almost dead. So that's why they have all this energy, and that's why the film is like them doing everything not to kind of sync with everybody else. And obviously, it's the film is talking to Cameroon society somehow, and in that sense, I wanted to believe that when we made the film, this was not already the Cameroon society. Maybe today is, unfortunately. Right. But when we made the film, for me, it was a kind of extrapolation of what I was thinking or I was sensing is kind of the society we might have. So in that sense, the speculation is not. There's always this idea of giving a moral or being moralistic when you make a film, so that you kind of try to do good somehow, with the film. I don't know how much you succeed or I succeed doing this, but it was the idea that at the end, whatever is coming out is following this kind of relation between the reality and whatever is being created as a speculation.
Because I was going to ask you, and I think we had talked a little earlier about sort of looking at the Bloodettes at almost a 20-year remove. It's set in 2025, which is next year. And, I was sort of thinking about this kind of temporality, about the idea of this kind of impossibility, the speculative, being used to perhaps, project a kind of possibility. And I mean, it's kind of dystopic in many ways. I mean, there might be some hope at the end, but it's a dystopic narrative. But I was thinking about, what does it mean to you to look back on this film, right, this science fiction film about a possible future, and then to be here now in the future, in a certain sense, to watch it now. How has that sort of time, that elapse of 20 years, has it changed your approach to this film or thinking about the speculative?
So it's true that next year it won't be a science fiction film anymore. So I cannot, there's no doubt that when I was making the film, I was very pessimistic. And I'm still kind of. Yeah. So I don't think it has increased or diminished, but I just think it kind of stayed, almost at the same level. I would say now it becomes the relation as a filmmaker we have with the society. What do you decide to show? What do you decide to tell? And what do you expect from this story you're telling, Yeah. I would say we give too much power to filmmakers, really, in terms of future. I don't think we qualify, really, to say what would happen. But what is really important, I think, is, and that's kind of what I'm personally interested in, again, looking at it from from a place. I tend to always say that making movies from a place more than making movies for an audience. I think it's important to see that cinema is not finished. I think somehow we tend to live like it's done. You know, like whatever we can do with cinema is there, and that's what we see now. And I still believe that, at least if I look at Cameroon society, I feel that cinema can do something. You know, and that's why I'm trying to work. I mean, at least when I produce a film, try to kind of keep that illusion or idea that cinema can do something. I don't know how much the films are successful in doing this, but at least I have that belief. You know, now it's up to us to reinvent it, to kind of find how to work with it, so that cinema does something to the society. And this has nothing to do with the audience, the success of the film, but it's just that as a medium, I think it's a transformative tool, or it could be a transformative tool.
Right. And maybe to think about your use of cinema here. I mean, it's such a, I think inventive, at times experimental, sort of questioning itself throughout. What genre is this? What are the possibilities or the limits or the boundaries that I can begin to sort of explore, right, through this cinema? And I wanted to maybe think about the use of the Mengongvu, Mongvongu, and to think about that in terms of sort of presenting your protagonists, the two young women, Isma Jolie and Chuchu, and to also think about the use of this, I guess it was a pre-colonial practice that was matriarchal, right, at its core, and how you bring that into this particular text.
Okay, one thing about cinema in general is the idea that not cinema. I was trying to play with the idea of modernity and future and science fiction, but using something from the past. You know, so that those two are not really incompatible. I didn't want to kind of oppose that past tradition and something that's supposed to be modern and futuristic. I like the concept of Mvungu. I read about it as a woman's secret society. And a woman's secret society where women kick men out and take over when things are bad. But things have to really be bad. Yeah. So for me in the film, I was feeling like, Cameroon is bad, with the government and all this. So it's time for this Mvungu to be performed. And in this Mvungu business, it was supposed to be older women. But based on what the story, the young women are the ones who are closer to power somehow. And they only had to be kind of coached by the elder one. So that's kind of how I organize it. And I think actually the very first idea of this film came from, can I tell the story? It's a little bit long.
Oh, go ahead.
What happened is that I went to Cameroon and I went to the Minister of Culture, and I remember that the director of cinematography said, go say hello to the minister. And I was like, why? I don't have anything to tell him. He said, no, you should go and say hello. So, okay, I'll go and say hello. But to say hello to the minister, you need to feel a kind of audience, like from request for a meeting. Then somebody asked me to pay for it. And I'm like, first, I didn't even want to meet this guy. Now I have to pay for it. So I said no. And I went back home, and then I had a neighbor, a young girl like this, who was like, you want to see the minister? She has the phone of maybe 10 ministers and phone numbers. And she was with another friend who had all the numbers of, all the. So I felt like between these two, they had the whole government, like in their hands. So they could make a coup if, it was possible. Anyway, so I just thought about how real it was, that they actually were so close to power, but the power somehow that is not performing for the people. So I just thought somehow they could be at the very center of a story like this.
The way in which it's sort of transpires is as though the two protagonists, Choo-Choo and Majoli, are possessed at certain points. And you use this amazing way of showing a type of body, right? The body in motion, either through fast or slow motion or through the use of prosthesis. And I'm really amazed at the way in which sort of Majoli and Choo-Choo appear in this film. First, the image of Majoli as a sort of acrobatic sort of use. And to think about the ways in which they appear on screen, as opposed to the males, who are usually older or decomposed or in pieces. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your decisions in terms of some of those formal strategies or aesthetics of your film.
Yes, the body of the girls is actually a weapon. That's what I had to weaponize their body somehow, because also is what these men want. That's the whole business transaction is happening because they know that they want their body. So they want to take the money, by pretending or trying to give the body or something. And so it's a transactional object, is also the weapon. And also the body that is dead is also kind of represent all the other ones, So the body was actually central for sure in the whole story. And one of the elements, but that came after, it was that some people are shocked by, that representation of black bodies, and my answer was we used to walk naked anyway, so why are you worried about all this body being naked? So nudity of the black body, it's kind of very religious in terms of, either Islam or Christianity, but it's not African for sure, because, so. But I'm just saying that the fact that I picked the girls of that age, not younger, not older, because I was feeling that it was political. Everybody is intervening on their bodies. Religion, politician, I thought it was very good to play with that, because that was making the film more political. If it's a guy, nobody cares, but girls, everybody's involved. So I thought it was very important to kind of put it at the center and play around it.
Wonderful, thank you. Jean-Pierre, I was wondering if we would open up a little bit, maybe bring in our audience. So I'd like to turn to see if there are any questions from the audience right now. And we have someone walking around with a microphone.
Hi, I was just wondering mostly about your comment on the changing genres throughout the movie. What part in the process for you did that come about? While you were writing it or coming up with the idea, did you initially want to play with multiple genres throughout the film, or did that just come about naturally as you started to go into production and watch the story unfold?
It was kind of a concept. It's always challenging to make genre films feeling that you are going to be mimicking something and not being original somehow. So, and not beyond the fact that you're not original, but it's also the reality you are writing from. For example, when you call the police in Cameroon, they ask you if you have money for gas, you know, so that they won't come because maybe, and that's a fact. Somehow they don't have enough gas in the car. And even you do a car chase, you try to be mimicking Hollywood fame, but obviously very few people have gas in their car. So just to kind of show the limit of the context and the kind of life we have there, and when you start mimicking and just pretending to be doing I don't know, car chase or any genre without taking into account the context. So for me, it was a kind of creating a dialogue with the genre itself, you know, from the African perspective.
Hello. I really like the idea of merging together ancient concepts with modernity and like your filmmaking approach. And I felt like with the secret society of the female women, it felt almost like it was the ancestors looking over the women. So I wonder if there are any other spiritual or cultural references that you include in the film that we may have missed.
I'm not a specialist, so I just read. Now, actually, I know more after I made the film, but before I didn't know much. The whole Muvungu, I read it in a book, and I happened to meet afterwards the author of the book, who was an ethnologist. But then, and then I met, but recently, a lady who practiced it. You know, we did actually a little film about it. Like she did a kind of performing the Muvungu. So I have a kind of film where she's the one who mainly directed. She was saying what people should be doing. You know. So beside that, I don't really think of anything else. No, that was the only thing really as kind of African traditional practice or mystical practice in the film. In the next one, maybe there's something else. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the movie. I think it captured some of the concept that most of the Africans who live in Africa, who knows about Africa, live every day. But I have a question, but I'm gonna first put it in two parts. First, I want to commend you for not taking that aspect of, like the gentleman say, making pre-colonial Africa against like two different type of Africa. For me, what you say, I would like you to expand it. Why don't you think that there is no pre-colonial Africa and there is no new Africa? It's just a continuum. Why do you think it's a continuum? That was my first question. And the second question is, why you asking a question at the end of the film, but yourself, I believe you didn't take a stance in the film. Are you afraid of the present, using symbolism of the past to project a future that you want to see, but you don't want to tackle the present? Why you think? That's my opinion. You didn't even try to. Is it political? You didn't want to go there, or as a cineast, why?
Okay, so so the second question made me forget the first. So
Meaning that the Muvung, what you say is there is no incompatibility. And you see them most of the time in the West. They try to talk about the pre-colonial Africa versus Africa. You say there is no incompatibility. The practice that was in pre-colonial Africa never went away. They still exist.
is it what you're saying or are you asking?
You say there is no compatibility. I want you to, if you can talk, why you think there is no incompatibility between the Mavungu today.
So it's a film, huh? It's not really reality for now. So what I think is that, at least what I did for the film, is that they tend to blame the past, for example, to be responsible, or African culture to be responsible of an African that is behind. You know, I just think that's not, the past is not the problem. The African traditions are not the problem. So somehow the idea of moving forward, if there's any moving forward actually, has nothing to do with the burden of African cultures. And actually in the next film too, you're going to see the, because kind of the same thing, how African traditional or religion or of the cult of the ancestor could be seen in the future. So, so that was just the idea that even in the aesthetic way, visually, we tend to kind of separate both. So, and we think modernity, the future, is being kind of held back by the tradition. So I actually even use the past as inspiration for something futuristic, you know, in this film. For the second question, now I forgot the second. But what I want to say is that I hope that cinema could do more. I wish cinema could do more. And I made this film called The President because we had a president in Cameroon that's been there since Reagan here, I think. So he's still president and he's running next year again. So we is 90, I don't know how many, and he will be 100 years when he ends the next one. So, but the idea that, because when I made the film, it was banned, and then somebody said I made the film to, it was actually during a Q&A like this, that I made the film to kind of kick the president out or something. And I said, I wish. And it was reported in the police reports that I said that I wish. You know, so sometimes we give cinema so much power, and I really wish, you know, it could do more. And I think, how many of you have watched a film and then you go back home and you kind of refuse to sleep because something should happen? You know, you just feel like I'm just going back to my normal life after seeing this film. You know, it doesn't make sense. Something should happen. That frustration, for me, I say that cinema is doing things to us. I mean, I'm sure about that. And I think most of you have watched a Kung Fu movie, for example. You know, what made you feel that after watching a Kung Fu movie, you can fight? You didn't get any training, you know? And I'm sure if you're fighting, you'll be beaten up. But the feeling of feeling like strong, that you can fight, you know, I think it's just one idea of what cinema is doing to us or can do to us. You know, and cinema has been kind of hijacked, I think, by the business, because we write to make money, really. Like from the first sentence, I like a lot the how-to books. In America, there are many how-to books, you know, for films also. So the one I prefer is How to Write a Screenplay That Sells in 21 Days. It's about a recipe. And I remember I did one workshop like this. I think the script was great, but it had nothing to do with what I want to say. Yeah. So I think cinema now is being done in a certain way because now it's been a while. And I think we don't question and we don't even remember what it is or what it could be, actually. I also think most of you have Netflix now because that's the trend, huh? Have Netflix. And I don't know how many films are on Netflix, 1,000, 10,000, I don't know how many. And sometimes you flip on the 10,000 films on Netflix and feel like there's nothing, I'm going to bed. How can you flip on 10, I don't know how many films, like all these films, they feel like there's nothing. And if you take the cost of each film and you add them up, it's a billions of dollars. And you still feel like there's nothing, I'm going to bed. Okay, why is it the case? I think this should make us question the cinema we practice, the cinema we watch, if it doesn't do things to us, if it doesn't, if we can flip on so many films and we still feel like there's nothing. So and I think today also, and it's a question for us filmmakers, and I agree with your question. Everybody has a phone, and with a cinema quality camera. It was not the case 20 years ago, And I think if everybody potentially can make a picture or image, we were the only one that could make them 20 years ago. It means that we should rethink what is to be a filmmaker. And now people are talking about AI. And at some point I was wondering what kind of film would AI make? It will make a Netflix film. So it means clearly that as filmmakers, we're not relevant anymore, unless we kind of reinvent, how we practice cinema and how we do it, and in that case, the future is now.
Yes, right. And we were talking about, sort of these sort of immersive technologies or AI and, VR, AR. But I think, as you are speaking, you're talking about another kind of invention. It's technological, but it's also about thought. And the kind of work that you're doing in the Bloodettes in terms of putting forth science fiction and even the hybridity of genre, horror, science fiction, film noir, and beginning to sort of question yourself and the film questioning itself, right, in many ways becomes part of this kind of new invention. But I think I wanted to return again to science fiction. The first thing you said was, I was surprised that your film, The Bloodettes, was the first science fiction, African science fiction. Why did you sort of say that here, first of all? And thinking about, sort of the larger sort of African cinema, why do you think your film, why did you think that at this particular moment you put forth this particular film?
Okay. It's mainly to allow us to go where we're not allowed to go, or we kind of don't want to go somehow. I'll talk again about this science fiction film that is called The President, because it's very science fictional to think that a 92 years old president can die. So in the film, it's kind of speculative. He's disappearing, the president. So the film was not much about telling who he was, all the stuff he did in running the country, but it was to give space to people to kind of think about things they're not supposed to be thinking of. In Cameroon, when you say, what if the president dies? They say, no, he's not going to die. So say, but if they say, no, it's fine. So why are you talking about this? What is your problem? So you see how people avoid for serious reason too, because some are afraid, but it's just that they don't see life, beyond him. And so there are many spaces like that we're not allowed to go. Mm-hmm. And cinema, at the time of the film at least, could be designed or carved in a way where we kind of go there, even if when the film is over, we go back to where we were, So I think in that sense, to talk about science fiction, I think it gives that possibility to venture, to places that for some reason, I don't say forbidden, but we don't go. There is this French philosopher, Michel Serres, who says that at least talking about formatted film, I don't want to point Netflix, but I'm just saying formatted films, like scripted by how-to formula recipe, are doing one thing to the brain. He says that it's making us almost unable to get used to the unknown. Our brain is being trained only with the known, so we never venture to the unknown. And he says that we will be a kind of species that will disappear because when the unknown will come, we won't be ready. We won't know how to deal with the unknown. So somehow he says that all these formatted films, are kind of training us not to be able to survive as a species,
I think, as a sort of to maybe build on this idea of a sort of a cinema that, allows us to see and otherwise or possibilities. I was wondering if you could perhaps talk a little bit about naked reality and the idea of returning to science fiction, what is this, 11 years later, and using it again, this particular genre, for its capacities. What was it like to return to the genre? I mean, you had done Le Président in 2013, but in 2016, you once again put forth this science fiction.
Okay, I would say I really didn't plan it per se, like in terms of I'm going to do a science fiction film, but it's the idea that leads to that. What are you trying to convey? So the best form? I believe that there's not one formula for many films. I think one film, one formula. So each film should kind of find its own formula and find its own language and even semiotics in terms of language. So the idea behind Naked Reality was the cult of the ancestors, meaning how African practice religion, and sometimes it is not incompatible with being Christian or being Muslim. The idea of believing that the dead are not dead. So how it's kind of for granted. People, for them, it's kind of obvious that the dead are not dead. So now, there is something you will hear when somebody has bad luck, because in that film, the disease is bad luck. Bad luck like you have a flu or so. So because it's also kind of something easy to fix. Because bad luck being that maybe there's a kind of you just need to make sure you talk to the ancestors. But ancestors meaning your parent or grandparent or great-grandparent you happen to know who passed away, and you just talk to them instead of consider that they are not there anymore. So the idea is that even if in a lot of African countries, a lot of cultures, African culture, you have this, we as filmmakers, we haven't been able to represent some of these things, visually and also in terms of narratives. So I was thinking that it's good to kind of start creating the images of this kind of imaginary, even if, again, I put the story 150 years after, I don't know which year it was, but okay. But I think it's also about going where we're not allowed to go, or going where, because when you say cinema, it's not about those things, cinema is almost about mimicking what other filmmakers have done, or close, or what you've seen. So how do you kind of venture to spaces where there is so much to say, to show, but nobody has done that before. So I just think that it was very important to produce something in that vein. And it happened that putting it in the future was kind of helping me not to make people feel like this is some kind of ancestral from the past. So yeah, voila.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, and I think there's a hand here. Yes.
Hello, thank you so much for being here and for your film. I love the soundtrack of this film, and I am so struck not only by the music and the sound palettes that you incorporate, but the structure of the soundtrack and the sonic motifs and the sonic passages that recur throughout the film. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about the motivation behind that.
Okay. Yes, there are two things we try to do. Okay, we thought that we need something kind of that will like make how do you call it, like trance, like something repetitive, something envoûtant, comment on dit ça? Hein? Transit, yes. Because the film was all at night, and we couldn't have this sense of the space, so we kind of took the model of Portishead, the band, where you hear voice very far. So it was given the notion of space, you know. And then I found this trip-hop guy who's making electronic music, but playing it as a drum. Like he put sound in his box, whatever it was, and then he started playing it. It's never like the same every time he does it. And then I gave him some Cameroon music. He put it in, and then he started playing this thing. It's a guy from Chicago, actually was in Paris. And then I invited this Cameroon singer to work with him. First, they had a fight because it was like, she said this is not music. So but then they end up working together, you know. So, but it kind of gave some kind of nice thing according to what we wanted. But it was also, again, to stick to the concept of saying, let's play electronic music like a drum, because he plays it like as a drum, you know. And then add like these voices, African voices. So voila, that's how we kind of did it.
Incredible. Okay, well, I think that may end our Q&A. I just want to thank you, Jean-Pierre. We'll be able to talk more tomorrow after the 2 screenings, but I want to thank you so much for speaking about the Bloodettes and talking about your work, and looking forward to tomorrow.